Okay, so welcome everybody to the second episode of our new series, Talent Talks, where I'll be putting together expert panels to share their experiences, discuss challenges and successes when navigating the ever-evolving landscape of talent management. In this episode, we're focused on how to build a culture that breeds innovation. In today's dynamic business landscape, innovation isn't just a choice, it is a necessity. And to thrive in a world of constant change, organizations must cultivate a culture that not only embraces innovation, but nurtures it from within. Um, I've got a great panel today. If any of you joined us at the PropTech Connect event, then you'll have seen everyone here before, but I'll allow them to introduce themselves shortly. Aisha's having a few issues with her internet connection, so I'm sure she'll be able to jump on once that's sorted. But just a quick intro from me. I'm Alex Whiffin, co-founder and managing director of Cherry Pick People. We're a consultancy that specialises in talent solutions for the PropTech and real estate markets. We partner with businesses both large and small to enhance their talent processes, to enable them to establish more effective talent processes, which will help them identify, engage, and retain the top talent. Personally, I have a deep fascination with innovation, not only helping my client businesses in innovating and developing their talent processes, but for the broader sector. I'm particularly intrigued by the potential for technology to bring about significant and positive change in the wider world. So I'm really excited about getting stuck into this discussion today. Just before we do, I'd love this to be as interactive as possible. So please, everyone watching, if you've got any questions for the panel, post it in the comments. I will field as many questions as I possibly can. And just while we're getting started and the panel introduce themselves, please say hi and maybe tell us where you're watching from. So let's get stuck into this. So if you could each introduce yourselves and actually maybe give us an indication of what innovation means to you. So, Craig, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Alex, and hello, everyone. I'm Craig O'Donnell. I'm the Group Innovation Director at Grosvenor. So for those that don't know, Grosvenor is a 340-year-old real estate business based out of the UK, but we operate globally. And as you can imagine, for a business to be able to survive that length of time, actually, innovation is probably not a new thing for us. We've constantly had to evolve through the years. And my role is very much looking at how we support the business to solve problems that we have today, how we can transform the business, but also looking at how we can create value for the future using innovation as well. So it's both near term in focus, but also longer term in focus. And we do that by working with our colleagues across all our international locations and understanding what problems that they do have, but also working with the leadership in our business to think about how we can shape the business to create new revenue streams in the future as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Craig. And Peter, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Mikulic. I'm calling in from Sweden. I'm working as a digital transformation officer at Stena Property, which is one of Sweden's largest privately owned property companies. We are acting within the residential and commercial market. On my daily job, I work with managing our digital agenda and the digital platform supporting the daily business, which means it's both regarding the property management system, the workplace application and so on, but also the digitalization of our properties, which mean energy management systems and so on, of course. So I work with a rather small team, which we are having a great focus on both tech, but also on the human and the business side of the transformation. So we are a rather small team supporting all the business within Stena Property. And yeah, so that's me.
Excellent. And then Aisha, would you want to? Can we hear you? Are you on? I know we had some technical issues there, but yeah. Do you want to
Yeah.
introduce yourself?
Thank you. Hopefully it works fine for rest of the call. So I'm Isha Jain. I head up the digital and technology for CBRE for UK and Ireland division. And my role is to drive digital transformation. So looking at how we could drive more revenue, cost efficiencies through the use of digital, and really focus on kind of bringing in innovation with the use of digital and technology across the business to drive business growth.
Fantastic. And I'd love to get to understand what innovation means to you, as people driving innovation across your organizations. How do you see innovation? What does it mean? Aisha, do you want to go first with this one?
Sure. So I think innovation for me is driving a culture that fosters creativity and kind of encourage learning fast, because not necessarily all the innovation efforts would be successful. But if you create a culture that actually encourages that creativity, experimentation, which would help kind of leaders like us to adapt to the market needs, changing environments, the dynamic environment that we live in today, which changes nearly every 6 months rather than 10 years as it used to be. So yeah, if we can encourage that culture where people are more kind of incentivized, I would say to an extent even, to think differently and create and, be more creative and experiment different ideas. I would say that's really what innovation means to me.
Fantastic. And Peter or Craig, do you have anything to add to that, or do you have any different perspectives, perhaps?
Yeah, I would like to add that for me, innovation doesn't have to be as disruptive as you may think. It could be something that is new for me as an individual at Stena where I work. It could be something new for our organization or something new for our industry. I think looking into other industries is one way of also inspiring innovation in the industry you are acting within. And innovation also could be based on tech, which is the theme, of course, when working within prop tech, but it also could be just new ways of working and so on. So it doesn't have to be that complicated, actually.
No, it doesn't need to be a brand new product or something super shiny. It can just be the next step for your organization and that sort of thing.
I think what I would add to that as well, I think being in the real estate industry, and we all are committed to our net zero targets as organizations, and actually something like net zero and being more sustainable, it's probably fair to say we can't necessarily incrementally get there. We have to make big changes to reach some of the targets that we've got. So I think I agree with Peter in terms of there are small and incremental and transformational things that we can do, but also I think innovation is about being 10 times better as well. And we're not going to solve our net zero targets by incrementally getting there, or it'll take us a long time to get there. We won't meet our targets in terms of time scale. So I think sometimes we have to think big and act big. But to be able to do that, we need the culture within our business to be able to achieve that.
Definitely. I was looking at some stats before for this call, and according to a study by McKinsey, companies in the top quartile for innovation metrics outperform their peers in terms of growth and profitability by as much as 30%. So, it really it has a real big impact on the success of an organization. So, getting into the meat of this discussion, then it's how do we create that culture? So, in your opinion, what are the fundamental elements necessary for cultivating a culture that fosters innovation? What do people need to be doing?
So I go for it this time, or Craig?
Yeah, go for it, Peter. Yeah, go jump in.
Thank you. I think that one thing is about fostering and curiosity and courage within the organization. So curiosity means that the management have to support investigating new ways of working, new tech, of course, or new behaviors. And as I also said, look into how are other industries acting in today's ever-changing landscape. I think that's a very big part. When it comes to courage, I think it's needs to be the courage of taking decisions on perhaps not that very set, defined outcome of an activity. It could be explorative. You just have to start explore something, and during that exploration, you will probably do some very great learnings. And learning is also another outcome. And I think you have to celebrate also learnings. That it doesn't always have to be something concrete. And I think the courage is also about canceling things that hasn't gone that well. It could be a trial of some sort, so you don't keep on throwing good money on bad ideas also. So that kind of courage is also something that you don't say, we have invested this much, so we have to finish it.
Keep going.
Yeah. And so I would like to say, so encourage people to try things they haven't done or tried before, because they are outside of their and our comfort zone, and that's where development occurs.
Excellent. I mean, how I mean, I totally understand that courage and sort of not being afraid to fail, I suppose, or make mistakes. I mean, how do you make that happen? How do you make the team or the organization feel comfortable to be able to do that?
Yeah. So I think I completely agree with Peter. I think having courage and that curiosity is really, really important. So I think, how do you do it? You really allow people to fail. And I think when we say failure, it's actually not really a failure, it's learning, because people learn from the failures. So the more experimentation you do, and you could start small, so you don't have to invest kind of millions and millions of pounds or dollars in innovation. So you start small and be more iterative. Also partner with some friendly clients, where you're, let's say if it's a product you're launching or doing something completely different, partner with some friendly clients, or even within internally in the business, to see the viability of that idea. So I think it's really about allowing people to fail, be able to do experimentation, and not have a punitive culture where you're kind of blaming people for those failures. So I think it's really being really open about it and championing it truly from the forefront. So leaders have to do that. It's really championing that change and allowing people to take calculated risks, because I think everybody works in the benefit of the organization. Nobody wants to kind of spend money. And in tougher times like these, what we have today, it's even more important for organizations to continue to invest into innovation. So I think showing visibly that they're investing into innovation, allowing people to fail or learn fast, and also being more creative and championing it from the forefront.
Amazing. Craig, I'd love to get your input as well here, because obviously being part of such a historic organization that maybe people might consider to be obviously been around for a long time, and maybe how do you encourage innovation? How does that happen in an organization such as Grosvenor?
Yeah, I think, and I would agree with everything that Peter and Isha have said. I think what I would add in terms of almost the behaviour in an organisation is patient. We live in a instant, always-on culture that we expect results quick. I think with innovation, particularly when you are learning and you're iterating, that it requires a little bit of patience. So I think that's really, really important. But also, I think within any organisation, it is important to have structure as well in terms of your innovation activities. Many people might think it's a scattered gun. You come up with a great idea and you go and do it, but actually having structure and focus on what you're trying to achieve, linking it to business outcomes and business priorities is really, really important. And also, I think in terms of being able to encourage people to come up with ideas, but actually people can come up with ideas quite easily. It's then looking at how you execute against that. So having resources to help execute against the brilliant ideas is important, and that might be people, but it also might be some capital. So actually think about how you're really going to allocate funds to experimentation, because I think that the worst thing you want as a business is not being able to progress a great idea if somebody doesn't have a budget to do it. So I think it's very important to think about how you allocate funding to innovation activities.
Excellent. And how I mean, how can you any of you shed any light on maybe how you put that budget together, or what company, maybe what someone might be able to go to your business leaders and say, this is how much, a percentage of our turnover is that what you put in, or how does it put together?
Yeah, I'll speak from our experience, our example. So we hold some budget centrally to support experimentation. That's an effective working capital budget. It's a very small amount. When we set up our innovation team, we were very deliberate in limiting the amount of capital that we had, because actually we think people are more resourceful if they're constrained. But we didn't also want the fact that somebody in our operating part of the business couldn't progress an idea if they didn't have budget available. So our budget is there to help in experiments. We then it's competing with other allocation and budget for experiments as well. So people have got to present a case in terms of what they're looking to achieve and what outcome. And ultimately, the business is willing to write that experimentation budget off. I think back to what we said earlier in terms of failure. If people are worried about having to justify that spend, then if an experiment's not going well, they might hang on to it a bit longer because they want to deliver success. But actually being able to, or having the attitude that you're going to write off that budget for experimentation is important, and that you're going to learn from that experience. And then I think once we get to a position where an experiment has been successful and is then looking to scale, then that's a different business case that we have to present and request more funds at that point. So that's the approach that we take.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with that. I think setting aside a budget is always a great idea for innovation. Unfortunately, what I've seen in my experience, that is the first budget that gets cut down when the environments are tough, because people don't really know what you're getting out of it. So I think it's being quite strong about it as a leader to retain that budget. Like, we have AI now coming up. Everybody across the industries is figuring out what to do with AI. And if you don't have any budget to do experimentation with some of the AI technologies that's out there, you're never going to be on that journey. And I think technology, unfortunately, I think is such that by the time you experiment, deploy, and start gaining benefits, you're already kind of a year into the investment. So since you started investing, so you have to do it now. And I think that's the culture we need to have conversations with the CEOs or chief execs to say, you need to retain that budget, even in the tough times, continue to invest, because the benefits might come in only a year later or 2 years later. So I think that's really being strong about keeping that budget.
It's a challenge, isn't it? And in that market, probably the most important time to keep the innovation going, but actually maybe when there's most pressure on those, constraints on that budget. Taz has put a great question in the chat there. I will get to that in a minute, but just on this point, in the face of budget constraints like we have now, how can they prioritize? How can companies prioritize and allocate resources to support innovation initiatives? And obviously it's really important. I don't know how we can answer this question. It's quite challenging, but I imagine quite a few people are facing this, of innovation managers or people driving responsible for that within organizations. What can they say to the board or whatever to help ring fence that budget, I suppose? Or have you got any tips for them?
I would say if you're driving, let's say, some initiatives you're doing, which are not innovation, but your standard projects, which are driving some cost efficiencies, any efficiency you drive as a result, you could set that aside for innovative efforts. So being more creative around financial planning, I think I would say is really important when you're setting aside budget for innovation. So it could be any revenue you gain, which you weren't expecting, which is kind of some things come up and you've started to gain revenue or have a new client. You could set that budget aside specifically for innovation or driving cost efficiencies through other areas and use that budget for innovation. But it's always being more creative and also starting small. I think starting small gives a lot of confidence to the leaders, where you're not spending loads and loads of money on innovation.
I would like to join you, Isha, there. And I think that starting small and working small is actually the way probably most of the innovation is done in companies and organizations. That innovation is done without budget, you could say. People are doing this within their current budget, you could say. And I think they have managed to do that by doing this in small steps and so on. So I think that you don't have to think innovation as being these kind of very, very large initiatives. Sometimes, of course, you got to have them and with special funding, but I think that's some innovation can be done in the daily work also.
Well, like Craig said, having a bit of having constraint actually is maybe when it forces more creativity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You've got to think of different solutions, and it's not just, oh, we'll just buy the next kit, but it's how do we do it? How do we do it differently and meet those constraints? It breeds creativity, doesn't it, in itself? So might have a few innovation managers going, no, you just stripped us of our budget.
Yeah, I think people think that innovation's plugging in a shiny new bit of tech, and it's not. Back to what Peter said earlier, it's as much as how you do things as what, and actually changing how you do things doesn't cost anything, and so therefore innovation doesn't have to be expensive. And also I think during difficult periods that there's always a part of the business that is wanting to solve problems, and therefore as people that are leading innovation within an organization, it's been able to help and support those people that they might just want to do things a little bit differently, and we can help, and ultimately that might drive the top line as well as the bottom line. So I think that identifying opportunities is very, very important, because there will always be opportunities to innovate, irrespective of if you've got lots of capital to do it.
Amazing. Well, let's jump into the question from Taz here. She's asked, what role does diversity play in cultivating an innovative culture, and how can organizations ensure diversity within their teams?
Yeah, please, Isha.
Okay.
Please.
So I think diversity plays a significant role in cultivating a culture of innovation. I mean, and it's not, for me, it's not just kind of gender diversity or cultural diversity. I think what we need to look for is a diversity of thought. And that could come from different cultures or different genders, or, a mix of kind of different types of audience. So what I've seen changing over the last 5 years, particularly, historically, all the strategy, all the innovation that you drive has always been top down. Whereas over the last 5 years, the trend is you actually bring in graduates and apprentices along with your C-suite, CXOs, in the strategy conversations, because you're building an organization for the future. And that's quite a massive change to the way we used to operate historically. So again, that brings diversity of thought when you're putting in CXOs together with kind of really young talent and bringing in different perspectives into the conversation that drives the culture of the company, but not just the strategy of the company and the future growth. So I think it plays a significant role, and I think it has to be diversity of thought along with everything else.
Definitely.
I totally agree with you, Isha. On diversity of thoughts is the key, because you could work with not just bringing in graduates and so on. You can just mix between organizational units within your company and start to use them cross-functionally, mixing diverse perspectives on your business, actually. So that's a very easy way of actually creating diversity, just mixing people who are not used to work in the daily work together.
Yeah, I think also, just to add to that, Alex, I think within an organization, it's very easy to have groupthink. So I think that even with a diverse workforce, it's very easy to fall into old ways of doing things. And I remember a few years ago, I spoke to quite a respected innovation leader within a very traditional business. And what they did, particularly around kind of team meetings or brainstorming exercises, is what he called, he would like to appoint a rebel in the room. So somebody that had the deliberate role of actually being a bit of a rebel and questioning and doing things differently, just to try and encourage that diversity of thought and a different way of doing things. So, and people were slightly outside their comfort zone being that rebel, but everyone knew that that person had permission to be that rebel. So it wasn't confrontational, but it just created a different way of doing things within that traditional organization, which I thought was excellent.
That's a great idea. I love that. I've had a chatting with a lady who was on one of my previous webinars, actually, and she was suggesting about having a almost like a shadow board, which is made up of people within the organisation, and they come together and propose new ideas that get put to the actual board. So maybe like people who are joined the business early, or who are you know like the grads or whoever from different aspects who maybe aren't as long in the industry but come together with different ideas to present these to the actual board, who been there a long time and may have that group think. So to sort of challenge that and present some different and new and innovative maybe ways of operating. So I thought that was a good idea as well. But,
yeah, I think there's a danger though, I think at times where people within organisation think innovations for the young team, and actually whilst the young team might have enthusiasm, they might actually have expertise, it's very rarely they have influence within the organisation. So I think it's important that leadership lead by example, because people follow that example. So I think that whilst you might think it's for the young team, actually having a blend of expertise and experience across the business, I think is what's required for innovation.
Makes loads of sense. I've got another great question here from Tracy, actually. How do you think that organisations that are highly regulated and risk averse encourage being comfortable with failure? Sounds like Tracy is talking from a not-for-profit organisation, maybe a little bit more sensitive to that. Would anyone like to field that one? How you might help them become a bit less risk averse, highly regulated environments?
Yeah, well, I'm a non-executive on a housing association as well. So whilst I'm obviously not part of the executive or responsible for operational delivery within that organisation, I think that a housing association does have to innovate. I think it has to continually respond to the change in regulatory environment, which changes daily, but it seems like, so they're having to respond. I think their customers that live in their homes have different needs, and therefore they have to be able to respond to those needs. They've got challenges like how to make buildings and homes more efficient and meet their net zero goals. So it's not necessarily any different. And I think what we said before, I think still rings true for those not-for-profit organisations. I think it's starting small is really important, not committing a huge amount of resource and thinking about the risk and particularly regulatory risk, starting small. And if that's something that they think is going to be successful, then scaling at that point. So I don't think the toolkit for innovation is any different. You just got to be mindful of the regulatory framework and environment that you do have to operate in.
And I would also add, I think, to what Craig said, I mean, for them, actually, it's more of a need to do it because they're far more constrained on budgets than we are in the big corporate environment. So when you're constrained on budget, you've got really, really small amount of money to spend on whatever. So unless you are innovative and identifying different ways to spend that money to get the best value, you wouldn't be successful. So I think for them, it's actually almost a need to do that.
Yeah, I can just emphasize on the risk management activities is to do things in a small scale and on a short period, so you actually can act on the outcomes rather fast, rather than going into large projects with high risks and high values on stake. Yeah, keep it small, and I think also keep in mind always, as I think Craig said, scale. How can we and should we scale this idea or initiative? So you have this scaling activity in your top mind when doing these how do you say, pilots or proof of concepts or whatever. So you don't end up in this proof of concept graveyard, as you probably have heard a lot of people doing.
I think also what you mentioned earlier about having that budget set aside and knowing it, it's to be used, and it doesn't necessarily have to result in something. This is specifically for that. So that frees up. It's not like we have to have a 5 times return on investment for this budget, and like say if it's small, then that risk doesn't feel as great. But if at the outset that takes away the fear of failure, that's it's not a problem, I suppose. I wanted to touch on that point actually that you mentioned earlier, Craig. It made me think about it. Was sort of the need for innovation to be a cultural thing. We sort of, the mistake is often made that we've hired, Dave in the corner who's the innovation manager, and it's his job to innovate, and the rest of us don't have to worry about it. But from everyone I've spoken to, it really needs to be cultural and driven through a whole organization. Is there? Have you seen that before? I'd be interested to know, maybe along this line, is any mistakes that you've seen businesses make? You don't have to name and shame them, but have you experiences that you've had where people are trying to innovate or do that but go down the wrong path, and they go, oh, we've hired an innovation manager, and that's actually maybe counterproductive to putting it across the industry, the company.
Shall I kick off on that one?
Yeah, go for it, Chris.
Yeah, I think what's important to say is that I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach to innovation. I think you've got to do what's right for your business, and therefore the approach that we take at Grosvenor might be different to what Isha takes at CBRE. So I think it's important to do what's right for your business, because there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. To your point, I remember a few years ago I had an example of, it was a financial institution created this fantastic new space in one of the floors within their headquarters, a big glass box, and that's where they said innovation would happen, and it was always empty. And to that point, that you can't just hire an innovation person and think you're innovative. I think it's important for the organization to innovate together, but also recognize that innovation is not for everyone. So I'm a big believer in going where the energy is within a business. So actually, if there's one particular part that wants to do something different, wants to seek your help to do it, then go with where that energy is. And then ultimately, when you start achieving results, then others within your organization will look upon that and get a bit of FOMO. They want a bit of that action. They want to do something different and exciting, and then the culture starts progressing. The other thing I think is important is that certainly early on in an innovation journey, don't necessarily put pressure on yourselves in terms of, right, we will need to do X amount of experiments, because you then just do innovation by numbers. I think it's very important that the innovation that you do, whether that's been successful or whether you've learned from it, is telling the story around those activities. So I think storytelling is a big part of enhancing the culture of an organization. So letting people know, letting people see when activities happen, but also back to that kind of giving people trust and getting them to understand that not every innovation is successful. Celebrating some of those learning experiences as well as part of your innovation journey is, I think, very, very important.
I would also add, I think overemphasis on short-term goals is also quite a big mistake. I think a lot of leaders actually focus on short-term financial goals, such as like 12 months budgets, kind of recovering the money, etc. And that only leads to incremental innovations, doesn't really lead to anything breakthrough. So if as an organization you really want to do something completely different or breakthrough, and kind of be more futuristic, then you would have to allow longer term gains and focus on longer term gains rather than the short term. Also, I would say, recognition and rewards is really, really key when you're trying to build that innovation culture. So, and visibly recognizing people. So not just kind of giving somebody promotion who was due for promotion, actually visibly making that effort to, incentivize, recognize people. Otherwise, in companies who don't innovate, you would start seeing attrition as well, because people are more motivated with something different, something new, being able to trial things. So yeah, I think not having kind of visible rewards, recognition, incentives also is one of the big mistakes.
Yeah. I would like to circle back to the issue of having a central innovation guy, girl, or function as such. That I think you perhaps shouldn't think of that function as being the ones who creates ideas, but they could be the facilitators, or they can be the enablers of the innovation that is done by all the employees. It could be the place where you can get some risk capital for the funding of your initiative. It could be methods for developing innovations and so on. So I think you have to have some place within your organization which have fundings perhaps, and some methods, some inspiration, and some leadership, you could say also, yeah, to support the individual who comes to your management and say, I've got a super idea. Yeah, that's we know how we can explore it together. Yeah.
Excellent. We just had another question come in. Andre, hi Andre, hope you're well. Good to see you. Andre asked the question, how do you manage the innovation priorities inside an organization? That'd be very interesting to hear your thoughts on that. Panelists, who wants to pick that one first?
I mean, I can go. So I think we all have to be really realistic in our corporate environments. I think we only have limited amount of budget, so clearly you can't do everything. So some things would have to either be pushed behind or not being done. So so I think it's a really good question on how do you prioritize various efforts that you need to invest in innovation. So I think one is being transparent, really being transparent with the organization, what you're investing in and why you're investing in, choosing those areas, and why you're not investing the ones you're not, and what's the plan for those. So I think being transparent then develops a culture of trust and more open communication. But in terms of choosing the priorities, I think it's you could use different factors, whether that innovation is a quick win to the business, because sometimes you choose quick wins over higher revenue, or you could go with kind of big returns, which is either revenue or cost savings, or you could even think of it as a strategic initiative. So something, it's an area or a market you want to get into, you're not into it right now, but it's more of your organization strategy and you want to go and trial a new initiative within that market. So you could look at different factors of prioritizing which innovation efforts to invest in, and that could be from low cost to quick wins to higher returns, or completely strategic. So there could be different factors, and like Greg said, one size doesn't fit all. So everything has to be really what's right for your organization.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of tied into the overall business strategy and how. I mean, have you, Craig or Peter, do you have anything to add from your experience?
No, I think as Isha said, the visibility of how you're processing ideas and initiatives is very important, because if people don't get very often perhaps no feedback at all, that's a big killer for innovation.
Yeah, that's to crush the innovation.
Yeah. And I think linking the decisions towards the business plans for your business. So I think that's very important. So also there's a rationale in your decision making. So it's not ad hoc. It's actually linked to which are the long-term goals you're working towards as a whole.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I think you've just got to be very disciplined. I think it isn't scattergun. It has got to have a focus. It has got to be linked to your business priorities. So when a prop tech company comes knocking on the door in your organization and it's got a new shiny solution that's going to solve all your problems, is it actually going to solve a problem that you've identified? And if it isn't, then actually that's not a priority. So being very disciplined, I think, in terms of your approach. Also thinking about how you're going to deploy it. So one is if it's something that you want to deploy in an asset, is identifying a place to do it. Identifying again, if it is successful, how it's going to scale, because all these things have to be considered when you think about when you're prioritizing what your innovation activity is going to be. So back to Isha's point, there's some things that are going to be low-hanging fruit that you can deliver straight away. There's some things that might take longer and need more effort, and actually you're probably going to do less of those than you are going to do of the former. So having a balance of the two, I think, is important.
Cool. Got another question here from James Hanson. He says, to develop a truly innovative culture, should companies take risks when hiring new people? and rather than hire someone who ticks every box for a specific job, recruit based on how people think and their real potential. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that one, Donald.
Yeah, perhaps you all have heard the saying of hire for attitude, train for skill, which means that the attitude of people you're hiring is very important for your innovation culture. So, but of course, all the formal skills you have to have in place, but I think the attitude is very much of a key success factor for innovation. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would also say I think you need to probably get a balance right. So you absolutely don't want to hire somebody who ticks all the boxes for a particular job. You do want some diversity of thought, but at the same time, you also don't want to hire somebody who doesn't fit entirely with the culture of the organization, because they would get frustrated. They would come in and get frustrated and would want to leave soon. So I think you definitely need kind of some different skills with every job that you already have, because that's why you're hiring new people, so they can bring that fresh perspective. They can bring in some newness and some more innovation into the job. But at the same time, you need to be quite careful about hiring somebody that actually is really good fit with the culture of the organization.
I just would like to add a brief. Okay. Just short, Craig. I also think that overselling your company as a very innovative company when it's not is also something that is not a successful way. So we have to be very realistic and transparent where in what kind of culture this person is recruited to. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Craig.
Almost a buzzword rather than. Yeah, go on, Craig.
Yeah, I think the points being made are right. I think you probably lean a bit more on the behaviours when you're hiring for an innovation role rather than necessarily the experience. But yeah, you don't want a person to come in and be rejected by the organization because they're just doing things very differently. So I think you've got to look at what your organization and where they are in their innovation journey and the type of behaviors you think you need to be able to help coach people in the business to bring them forward on the journey. Some it might be more aggressive, some might be it's more of a gentle approach. I think you've got to hire the right person for the type of innovation that you want to do and the type of organization that you want to do, because ultimately you want them to be successful. You don't want them rejected by the white blood cells of their organization ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it'd be interesting to know, are there any things that you look out for when you're hiring for your teams, thinking, specifically they're sort of innovation teams, obviously, but, be interested to know, is there anything in particular or a question you ask or something that makes people stand out as thinking in the right way to be innovative?
I think that people have to show their curiosity by perhaps informing me how are they staying informed and informed in development surrounding our company. It could be both in tech, of course, since tech is very close to mine, but it could be other trends, both in social or business. So I think somebody who has a 360-degree surveillance of what's going on, that's important for my team, actually. Yeah.
I think there are a couple of questions I've asked in various interviews which have been, I think, thrown away people a little bit. So I think one is ask somebody like, what's your best and most successful project you've ever done in the last 5 years? And when they talk about it, you say, if you were to do that completely different, how would you do it? So I think that really gets people thinking and get you to find out whether they can really be innovative. Other one I've asked people, actually, that was quite interesting. I've said, look on your phone, tell me the app that you absolutely hate. It's one app on your phone that you just don't like and you really want to get rid of it. And then they will say, which one is that? And then you say, no, actually, you have to sell this to a customer, because that's the app your organization has developed. They're looking for growth with that app, etc., etc. So sell it to a customer. How would you do it? So I think it's really getting people to think on their feet and asking them questions which are not necessarily kind of what have you done on your experience, but really thinking, could they think differently?
Yeah, on the spot thing. Yeah, amazing. So I mean, we talked about diversity, and actually another stat that I found was the Boston Consulting Group found that companies with diverse management teams, or more diverse management teams, have 19% higher revenue due to innovation. On that topic, what specific leadership traits and behaviours are crucial for fostering a culture of innovation within an organisation? So, we talked a little bit around the C-suite and that sort of stuff. What traits are required or behaviours are required to really help drive that?
I think, from my perspective, I think trust is important. So, particularly trying to encourage people to come up with new ideas and giving them permission to go ahead and progress and experiment, I think is being able to trust your people is really, really important. The other thing I would say is patience. We've touched on it before, that people are expecting quick results, or they're expecting short-term results, and innovation is naturally a longer term play. So actually having some patience around the activity, having patience that some things might not work, but also having patience that it might be a little while until you reap the benefits of those activities that you're doing. So I think trust and patience are probably two characteristics that I'd be looking for in my leadership.
Yeah.
I would add, I think being more visible about leading and championing innovation. So rather than kind of being in your Google Plus office, I think as a leader, being kind of really, really visible to the organization, being in innovation conversations, workshops, even with kind of junior boards or shadow boards, etc. Leading it from the forefront, I think it's really important. And also, I think other things that we've touched earlier is allowing budgets to be set aside, rewards and recognition to the organization, being really open, building that trust. I think all of those factors are really important in the executive leadership.
And I could add to that. I think that creating an environment of emotional safety, where you encourage people to speak out and be transparent and to talk how things actually are or are developing, rather than trying to manage a project going in the ditch, you could say. So I think that kind of safety is very important. And also think that, as someone of you earlier speakers said, I think we're playing the long game, or what do you say? Yeah, this game never ends. It just goes on.
Long-term view.
Yeah, long-term game. Yeah.
And I will ask you shortly, maybe for some takeaways for people out there, sort of top 3 most essential actions an organisation can take. And I think we've got a few points around what we've talked about today. But just before we get into that, I mean, one more question that I'd be interested to get your thoughts on is how do you balance the need for structure and process within an organisation while fostering a culture of creativity and innovation, so that the balance between the tried and tested and then the implementation of new ideas? How do you guys do it currently, or how are you experiencing that?
I think combining that with, I would say, probably change management, because implementation, I think, is quite key. If you have got an idea that's successful, let's say, and you want to deploy that or implement across the organization, you need to have a really robust change management around it. So, people are really buying into that change and understanding what it has led to. So I think you need to have clear processes around implementation of it, and by when, etc., and what's the benefit you're looking to get out of it. And I think for kind of innovation itself, trialing and testing. But again, if you're building multiple, let's say, trials around it, they need to have a very clear process how you're going to measure it. So have your KPIs around it. What is constituted as success? What is a failure? Because you may not have achieved the entire outcome, but if you have done XYZ things, actually, does that mean it's a success? So having a clear process around classifying what success means, but also then having a very clear change management structure around its implementation, I think, is really, really good.
Are there some things that you're often looking for? I appreciate it depends on, like we talked about before, it's not one size fits all, but are there some, some examples maybe of when you metrics you've used in projects to go, what was that? This constitutes success, or this constitutes failure.
Yeah, I think certainly. I mean, if I look at one example, let's say return to work has been a massive issue for everybody, over the last 2 years since after COVID. And what exactly are you looking for as an outcome? Is outcome actually people coming back to work, or is outcome your business productivity has increased? Or is outcome you're actually having more collaboration? And how do you measure that? I think really thinking about the outcomes as a result and then driving back what innovation do you want in your workplace. Does that mean you need to provide more social elements to the workplace? Do you need to provide XYZ or more client environments to the workplace, more collaboration environment to the workplace, and then driving your decisions as a result? I think that has really helped us in CBRE, where kind of when we launched this building, we had to really think about the outcomes we are looking from, whether it's from technology, whether it's from social connections, whether it's from the physical architecture of the building itself, and then drive innovation in different aspects. And that really helped us drive kind of return to work.
Excellent. Craig and Peter, have you got any examples of projects you've run and how you've measured it?
Yeah, we had a project within Stena for a couple of years ago, which actually had a rather large change of way of working when it comes to customer engagement and establishing a new customer experience, you could say, deploying new My Pages and establishing a new customer-centric handling, you could say. And what made us successful in that project was that we actually put some KPIs, as Isha said. What are the outcomes that we can and would like to measure? And we continued to measure them after the deployment. And we had a plan for how to reinforce the change. How can we secure that people are working the way that we have agreed upon and developed the solution for? And what are the pitfalls that people have perhaps fallen into? And so I think that using KPIs and measuring and tracking them after the deployment and having an action plan for them is key for the success. So you don't deploy new things that are not used actually.
Yeah, cool. And Craig, can you think of an example you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think there's probably two things I would say. I think that when you are looking at measuring an experiment, a trial, a proof of concept in particular, I think it's, especially if you're engaging with a prop tech startup, I think is mutually agreeing what success looks like, I think is really important. So then when it's a question, well, at the end of the pilot, what happens next? You've actually agreed what will happen next based on measuring the success of the project. So if a technology is meant to reduce electricity consumption in a building by 10%, well, you measure if it does do that. If it doesn't meet that objective, then it's not meeting its objective. So I think there's very clear measurements in that regard. I think there's also some work that we've done. We've looked at how deploying certain technologies have increased footfall into our retail destinations that have then increased sales within those locations. So actually thinking about what benefits you're going to deliver from that, and seeing if there are ways of measuring that and agreeing it up front with the company that you're working with. And then I think back to the kind of cultural point that we're talking about before, it's not just the culture within the organization. I think particularly working with startups, they operate at a different clock speed to a traditional business, and being able to manage the difference in the clock speed between a startup that's wanting to go 100 miles an hour and your colleagues within the business that might be wanting to go 30 miles an hour is quite a skill to have. So I think managing those two different speeds, but also different cultures, I think is very, very important to be successful in innovating within the corporate environments that we all operate in. And to be honest, technology, we're all technology leaders. Back to Isha's point, change and business transformation is all part of what we've done for a long time. And innovation is just a form of that change management. So any activity that we perform, whether it's implementing new systems, you've got to always get buy-in. You've got to agree how you're going to measure it. You've got to agree the value that you're delivering, and you've got to bring people on the journey and change how people might work. So actually, innovation that we're talking about is probably on a smaller scale to a lot of the larger transformation activities that happen daily in many of the organizations that we operate in.
Fantastic. One more question before we sort of wrap up here from Andre. What is the general consensus around the size of the company that you would be willing to work with for innovation projects? Pre-Series A, post-Series B, what sort of size? What are we thinking?
I think great question. I'm not sure actually if the size of the company would drive how innovative they are. I think budgets certainly. I mean, some companies have bigger budgets for innovation compared to others, but I think as long as we are convinced that the company is actually really innovative in whatever they do, and like Peter said earlier, it could be one person doing innovation in their daily life. So it doesn't have to be driven by the size of the company. It's how innovative they are and what changes they have done and how they have driven innovation. I think that's what I would say. But I don't know if Peter or Craig have got different views.
Yeah, I think what I would add, and I know Andre well, so he'll know the answer. I think that we work with all stages, but I think the earlier stage that you work with, the solution is probably not as oven ready as a later stage company. So I think that if you are going a pre-Series A or a seed, then you've got to be willing, I think, to collaborate more openly with that organization, help shape their product to meet the needs that you have as a business. Whereas the later that you get, a post-Series B, a Series C, for example, you're probably more plugging it straight in rather than collaborating with them to shape that product. And therefore, you might get more instant results with those more mature companies, but actually you might get more rewarding results with working with an earlier stage. But I think it just depends on the solution that you're trying to solve and what's actually available in terms of solutions. So it might be that some nascent technologies are the only solution available to help drive our sustainability agenda, for example. So you've got to be able to work with those companies where there might not be a ready-made solution available. So I think it's all types of businesses that we work with.
Yeah, fair enough. Right. Well, I mean, I'd like to give the audience something to take away with them today as well. So, I mean, it would be great to get your thoughts on, what are the sort of most essential actions? Let's try, maybe one each or something to, in terms of essential actions an organisation must undertake to establish a thriving culture that encourages innovation. I mean, we've had a few themes that have come up throughout the conversation, but what would be the standout ones for you? Who wants to go first?
I can go, so you don't take my points.
I said one each, just one each.
Yeah, one each. Okay, yeah. I think working cross-functional, setting up different task forces for specific focus areas, which means that you create this diversity of thoughts. That's my top.
Brilliant, love that. Craig?
I can go next. So I think for me it would be lead by example. So not just pay the lip service, but lead as a leader by example. So when you embrace change yourself, take calculated risks, support the change, it sets a strong tone and an example for rest of the organization. So I would say lead by example.
Craig?
I think having a learning mindset, being curious, I think is really, really important. Not having that fear of failure, seeing it as an opportunity to learn and improve and do things differently. So I think for innovation to be successful in any business, although there isn't one size fits all, I think you do need to have a learning mindset for it to be successful.
Brilliant. One of the things I picked up from your conversation, guys, is I thought the recognition, like awards and actual visibility of how it's being driven through a business. So, whole culture or the whole company can see what's happening, and that there's recognition for people that have had a contribution, and also this is where we're going. I think it really helps drive that cultural change. But we're out of time now, and I have to say thank you so much for joining me today, panelists. Lovely to see you all again after our event at PropTech Connect last year. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Bye
thanks
bye.
to all the audience
Bye
as well.
everybody.